The rain had just ceased when Jonathan Hale, a young man of modest upbringing and curious spirit, arrived at the heavy oaken door of the Ashworth residence. The house loomed against the fading sky, like some forgotten relic. Its windows blind with dust, its walls dressed in ivy that seemed determined to strangle the very stones. It was not a home so much as a mausoleum, pretending at life. He knocked twice and the sound echoed through the hollow corridors within. For a long while, nothing stirred. Then, at last, the door creaked open, revealing a woman whose face bore the pallor of candle wax, and whose smile, though polite, carried no warmth. "Good evening," Jonathan began. Mustering civility, though unease, gnawed at him. "I have only lately taken up lodging in the village yonder, and thought it proper to introduce myself to my neighbors." The woman inclined her head stiffly. "We do not often receive visitors," she said, her voice soft, yet brittle, like a thread stretched too tightly. "My husband is at study. You may call me Mrs. Ashworth." Before Jonathan could respond, a sound drifted from above the faintest melody, a girl's voice, lilting through the rafters like a ghost that had learned to sing. The notes were fragile but entrancing, trembling with both sorrow and strange sweetness. Jonathan's breath caught. "There is someone upstairs," he murmured. Mrs. Ashworth's expression changed. Her lips pressed together until they were bloodless, her eyes flickered toward the staircase, then back to him with a warning that was almost a plea. "Our daughter," she said at last, each word slow, deliberate. "She has been ill for many years. She never leaves her room. The singing, it comforts her." Jonathan felt the peculiar tightening of curiosity, half dread, half wonder that no sensible man ought to indulge. Yet the house itself seemed to lean closer, to whisper secrets through its cracked beams and shadowed corners. A step sounded on the stair behind Mrs. Ashworth. A tall figure descended, broad-shouldered, face carved with severity. Mr. Ashworth, his eyes dark, heavy with command, fell upon Jonathan like iron weights. "You have made your introduction," he said. "That is sufficient. Good night, sir." The door began to close, and then faint but sharp, unmistakably a whisper, slipped through the crack between stair and ceiling. A whisper that did not belong to either Mr. or Mrs. Ashworth. "Don't trust them." Jonathan froze. His heart leaped like a bird, startled from the bough. For in that hushed and hurried plea, he heard not sickness, but desperation. Not madness, but warning. The door shut with finality, leaving him in the damp night, staring at the dark windows where a song had lived, and where, he now knew, a secret trembled. But secrets, as he would soon learn, were not confined to one house alone. In this town, shadows had their own voices, their own conspiracies, and some even found their way onto canvas. For in the square, at the village's heart, dwelt Elias Crane, the painter. A man of renown, whispered of even in London parlors, whose works once glowed with such vibrancy that patrons swore the skies within them shifted, the rivers rippled, the faces breathed. Yet, in recent months, something had changed. The brilliance of color had drained from his art, until his canvases bore only pale ghosts of the world, as if the pigments themselves had abandoned him. Elias prowled his studio in despair. Canvases leaned against every wall, sickly washed-out things, staring back at him like corpses with painted eyes. His patrons grew restless. "Your genius wanes," they muttered. "Your hand is failing." Each word pierced him deeper than a blade, until one night when the moon was cruelly thin, and the wind restless at his shutters, he discovered it, not color, not paint, but shadow. His candle had guttered low, and upon the wall a servant's silhouette flickered. Desperation guiding his hand, Elias seized his brush, dipped it into the black, and dragged it across canvas. The shadow clung, unnaturally, like oil that had always been waiting there. When he stepped back, his heart stuttered. The figure on the canvas breathed. Not metaphorically. Chest rose and fell, slow, deliberate, as though trapped between strokes of paint and swaths of night. By morning, the servant was gone. The villagers whispered, their voices threaded with unease. First one missing, then another. No body found. No trail left. Only Elias's paintings, which grew each day more astonishing, more alive. Faces turned toward onlookers with pleading eyes, hands stretched as if knocking on the glass of another world. Patrons returned, entranced, declaring his genius reborn. Yet Jonathan, still haunted by the girl's whisper from behind the Ashworth door, watched the painter with unease. For he noticed what others dared not. Each masterpiece bore the likeness of someone who had vanished. And late one evening, when the fog was thick and the village bells told the hour, Jonathan swore he saw Ida painted woman's lips trembling on the canvas, forming silent words. Words that chilled his blood. "Help me." The painted lips still burned in Jonathan's vision as he fled the painter's studio into the damp, gasping air of the street. Those two words clung to his skull like a curse, echoing in every toll of the church bell, in every whisper of wind between the narrow alleys. And they drew his steps, almost against his will, back to the house where it had all begun, the Ashworth residence. Heavy with silence, thick with secrets, the windows stared down at him like blind eyes. He remembered the girl's voice, faint, sweet, but trembling with terror. "Don't believe them." His hand, though trembling, found the iron knocker. But tonight, no one answered. The house was asleep, or feigning sleep. The parents absent. The corridors hollowed, and so Jonathan climbed the stairs alone. Each step groaned as though unwilling to bear him. The walls seemed to close tighter, narrowing into a throat of shadows. At last, he stood before the door where he had first heard Clara's song. His heart rattled. He raised his hand, knocked, silence. He knocked again, louder, the sound breaking like thunder in the stillness. And then slowly, painfully, the handle turned under his touch. The door drifted open with a sigh, revealing darkness within. The chamber was empty. No bedclothes crumpled by a restless sleeper. No hairbrush or letters or signs of a young woman's daily life. Only dust, stale air, and in the farthest corner a mirror, tall and tarnished, framed in black wood, carved with twisting vines, that seemed almost alive. Jonathan's breath caught. For though the bed behind him lay untouched, the mirror showed otherwise. There she was, Clara, seated upon the sheets, her figure pale as moonlight, her dark hair veiling half her face, her eyes enormous pools of sorrow. She looked directly at him, through him, with the desperation of one drowning. Her lips moved, and though no sound should have crossed glass, the words seeped into the room as though spoken beside his ear. "They have imprisoned me here." Jonathan staggered back, his pulse racing. "My God, how?" Clara pressed a hand against the inside of the mirror, the glass fogging with the ghost of her breath. Her voice quivered, the weight of years pressing through every syllable. "Told the truth for me, stranger. Set me free. Before they bury me alive." Her eyes widened with sudden terror, as though something unspeakable loomed just beyond her. Jonathan's mouth opened to answer, but behind him, from the hallway, came the creak of a stair. Someone else was in the house, and the mirror's surface began to ripple, as if it were water disturbed by unseen hands. From that moment on, he could not keep himself away. He made excuses to return, borrowed tools, polite inquiries, the harmless chatter of a new neighbor seeking company. The Ashworth parents seemed to accept his visits with weary civility, their faces pale as if painted in ash, their smiles stretched and brittle. Yet, while the teapot rattled and the parlor clock ticked with suffocating slowness, Jonathan's thoughts climbed the staircase. And always, when the parents were distracted, when footsteps faded down the corridor, he stole to the room above. The mirror waited within it. Clara sat like a portrait come alive, her hands folded on her lap, her figure lit by a light that did not exist in the room itself. The more Jonathan looked, the less the chamber around him mattered. The more the chamber behind her seemed real, breathing, haunted. They spoke in whispers at first halting, then urgent. Then, as though they had known each other all their lives. "I have not left this place in years," Clara confessed, her voice tender and ragged, as though each word were a bruise. "I do not remember the touch of sun, nor the smell of rain. They bring food to the door. They say, it is for my safety. But each day, my body feels less, my hands thinner, my shadow lighter, as though I am being undone." Jonathan pressed closer to the glass, his throat tight with outrage. "This is cruelty. No child, no daughter should be kept like this." Her eyes shone, heavy with unshed tears. "Child?" She gave a bitter smile. "No, sir. I am no child. I am a memory in their house, a burden to be hidden, a ghost they feed so no one hears me starve." And though horror stirred his blood, something else stirred too, a tenderness born of pity, of fascination, of danger. He found himself waiting each day for her voice, each night haunted by her eyes. At last, one evening when dusk melted into shadows, Clara lifted her hand to the glass. A pale hand, trembling, desperate. Jonathan, against reason, against every whisper of fear, lifted his own. Their fingers met, divided by that cold sheet of silver dot, and then crack. A hairline fissure split the mirror, running jagged between their palms. Clara gasped, her face stricken between terror and hope. "Careful," she whispered, her voice shivering into the night air. "If it breaks, so do I. If it breaks, so do I," Clara had whispered on. Scarcely a heartbeat later, Jonathan felt the weight of another gaze upon him. When he descended the staircase that evening, he found Mrs. Ashworth waiting in the parlor doorway. Her hands, pale as parchment, were folded at her waist. And though her lips curved into the mimicry of a smile, her eyes bore the brittle sharpness of a blade long hidden in cloth. "You are kind to visit us," she murmured, voice low, trembling with something that was not quite gratitude. "But you must never trouble yourself with the rooms upstairs. My daughter is unwell. To stir her world is to stir her suffering. Jonathan bowed, though his chest burned with protest. I heard her sing, he said quietly, daring the truth. Whatever else she may be, she is alive. At this, Mrs. Ashworth's smile cracked, and her fingers clenched as though upon invisible chains. Leave it, she hissed, her voice trembling like glass about to shatter. You cannot imagine the ruin that comes of meddling in what should remain unseen. And behind her, Mr. Ashworth appeared, tall, severe, his shoulders stooped beneath a burden Jonathan could not name. His eyes were storm gray, filled with dread, and yet his words struck like iron. Sir, he said, every syllable weighted, there are things in this house that do not belong to your concern. If you are wise, you will forget the voice you claim to hear. Jonathan, cornered by their stares, gave no answer. But the fire in him only deepened. That night, when the lamps were dimmed, and the house lay silent, he crept again to the mirror. Clara was already waiting. Her face streaked with tears, her breath shallow as though she had been running, though no feet carried her. They know, she whispered, pressing her hand to the glass. They know you have spoken with me. Tonight I heard them speak below. If I try to leave, they will not confine me. Her voice cracked, terror rising like a tide. They will erase me, as though I never was. The fissure in the mirror gleamed faintly under the moonlight, like a wound refusing to close. Jonathan pressed his palm against it, heart thundering. Then I will not let them touch you, he vowed, his voice low but fierce. You are no phantom. You are flesh, blood, and sorrow. And I swear, Clara, they will not unmake you. And yet, from the depths of the glass, her eyes flickered with something he had not seen before. Fear. Not only of her parents, but of the very bond now binding her to him. Her eyes, flickering with that unnamable fear, did not release him, and Jonathan knew then that time itself was tightening its grip, ready to strangle whatever fragile bond bound them together. For 3 nights he did not sleep. He roamed the hushed corridors of his lodging, poring over volumes that whispered of rites older than the stones of the city itself. Candles burned to stubs at his elbow, their wax curdling like pale blood upon his table. And his hands shook as he traced symbols that no Christian prayer would dare contain. At last, when the moon stood high and colorless in the firmament, Jonathan stole once more into the Ashworth's house, his coat concealing a ring of keys and the trembling flame of a single candle cupped in glass. He closed the chamber door behind him, knelt before the mirror where Clara's face hovered faintly, and whispered, "Tonight, I will bring you through." Clara's eyes widened, half in terror, half in desperate hope. Her lips trembled. "You cannot. If they find us, then let them find ashes," he answered, fierce as a dying man's vow. The ritual began. Jonathan pressed the candle to the floorboards, circling it with salt pilfered from his table, murmuring words that tasted of iron and rot. The air thickened, the walls groaned, and the mirror swam with restless shadows. Clara's form shimmered, blurred, and then, with a gasp like breath torn from the grave, she stepped forward. For the first time, Jonathan beheld her not as reflection, but as flesh. Her figure was slight, wasted, as though famine had been her only companion. Skin pale as morning silk clung to bones too sharp for youth. Yet her eyes glowed with the sorrow and longing of a soul imprisoned too long. "Clara," he breathed, tears burning his throat. And when her thin, trembling hand rose, he seized it. Warmth frail, fleeting surged into his palm. Flesh against flesh. For the first time, they touched. Her lips parted, as though to speak words she had never dared to utter, when suddenly the door crashed open. The candle guttered. The shadows recoiled. And in the jagged frame of the doorway stood Mr. Ashworth, his face a mask of thunder. His eyes blazing with terror too vast to be mistaken for anger alone. Jonathan's heart stopped cold. He clutched Clara's hand tighter, and in a voice that split the chamber like a lash, the father roared. "Enough!" thundered the father, his voice like a verdict cast upon the gallows. And before Jonathan could summon a word in his defense, Mr. Ashworth's trembling hand pointed to Clara, her frail form shuddering in the candlelight. "You do not know who she is," the man bellowed, spit flecking his lips. "You do not know what she truly is." The air quaked. Jonathan, frozen, turned toward the mirror, and his breath fled him. The glass, fractured from his desperate ritual, now yawned with jagged seams. Through those broken veins emerged another Clara-like in every contour, yet wholly, dreadfully other. Her eyes, unlike the soft, sorrowful orbs of the girl who still clung to Jonathan's hand, gleamed with a malignance untamed. A slow, predatory smile bent her mouth, teeth glinting like knives unsheathed. She lifted her head, and in that gaze there was no plea, no fragility, only vengeance, long starved, and now unbound. "Do you see?" the father cried, his voice breaking into fear, into shame. "One daughter born of flesh, one daughter born of the looking glass. The mirror has claimed her image, her spirit. And this creature, this shadow hungers to take her place." Jonathan's pulse raged like a war drum. He looked from the Clara who wept, whispering through tears, "Do not believe what you see, Jonathan. I am still me." To the Clara within the glass, whose laughter now curled like smoke from a burning pyre, the mirror trembled, the shards rattling as though the glass itself were alive. The two Claras stared at one another, one pale and pleading, the other dark and gloating. And Jonathan felt his sanity teeter at the edge of a precipice too steep to name. The shadow Clara pressed her hand against the fractured glass, her fingers long and cruel, her voice a silken venom. "Free me, Jonathan, and I will show you a world without chains." The true Clara sobbed, falling to her knees, her thin hands clutching Jonathan's. "Please, don't let her take me. Don't let her become me." And there, in that chamber where candlelight battled shadow, Jonathan beheld not one Clara but two, flesh and phantom. Sorrow and spite, knew that to save one meant to condemn the other. The mirror groaned, threatening to break in full, and in the storm of cries and glass, the question thundered louder than the father's roar, louder than Clara's sobs, louder than Jonathan's pounding heart. Which Clara was the prisoner, and which the jailer? Which Clara was the prisoner, and which the jailer? The question rang like a funeral bell in Jonathan's skull, and as the mirror's groan deepened to a scream, he knew the time for riddles was over. The fractured glass pulsed as though a heart beat within it. Its shards were veins of light and shadow interwoven. Through one jagged seam, the pale Clara pressed her trembling palm outward, her lips quivering, eyes glassy with despair. Through another, the darker Clara leaned forward, her grin unfurling like a noose, her black hair fanning as if underwater. "You must choose," hissed the father, his voice a broken whisper. "This cannot go on." He sagged against the doorframe, eyes wild with old guilt. "Free her hand, you free it. Destroy the mirror and you destroy her forever." Jonathan's chest burned with every breath. The pale Clara's voice trembled across the gulf between them. "Please, Jonathan, don't let me vanish. I want to live. I have waited for you." The shadow Clara's laughter rolled like thunder across a black sea. "If she is free, I am free too," she crooned, her fingers sliding along the fissured glass like a predator testing its cage. "And I will choose you, Jonathan. We will remake the world together." A candle toppled, spilling wax like blood. The father's wife appeared at the landing, her face ashen, a rosary dangling from her hands. "He cannot do it," she murmured. "He cannot pick one without damning the other." Jonathan's hands closed on the brass key he had brought for the ritual. Its teeth dug into his skin. His gaze shifted between the Claras, the pale one's wet cheeks glimmering like morning frost, the dark one's smile glinting like a blade, and the weight of their twin eyes bore down on him until the room spun. "Choose, Jonathan," the shadow hissed, "or the mirror will choose for you." Glass splintered. A crack shot up the mirror like lightning. The pale Clara screamed, "I'm slipping, please." And her outline began to blur, as if she were being pulled backward into a pit of darkness. The shadow Clara, by contrast, surged forward, her shape growing more solid, her nails raking the inner edge of the glass. Jonathan staggered back, sweat freezing on his brow. He could smash the mirror, now end it, free the city from its curse, but erase the true Clara forever. Or he could turn the key in the ritual lock, pull Clara through, risk loosing her dark twin upon the world. Behind him, the parents sobbed, a grotesque duet. Ahead, two faces, one pleading, one promising, stared with equal hunger. The mirror's surface heaved once more. A voice, both Clara speaking at once, rose in a terrible harmony. "Choose us, or lose us both." Jonathan lifted the key in one hand, the iron poker in the other. His heart felt like it might burst through his ribs. And as the final shard of glass cracked, as time narrowed to a blade's edge, he realized this was not a choice between life and death, but between two versions of the same soul, one innocent, one monstrous, both yearning to be whole. The candlelight flickered out. The room fell into a silence so deep, it rang in his bones. Jonathan opened his mouth to speak his decision, and the mirror roared. Jonathan's cry split the air as he raised the iron poker high and, with all the might of a desperate heart, brought it crashing down upon the trembling glass. The room detonated in light and shrieks. Shards exploded like a storm of falling stars, slicing the darkness, slicing his skin, slicing the very silence of the house. For an instant, the air was nothing but glass and screams, Clara's desperate wail, the shadow's guttural roar, the parents' sobbing howl, his own heartbeat battering his skull. Then dash impact, Claratha pale, Claratha, from the ruin of the mirror, like a bird shot from its cage. Her body struck the wooden floor with a gasp of life, her thin chest heaving, her tangled hair spilling across Jonathan's lap as he caught her. She was real. She was warm. Her tears ran down his sleeve like melted ice. "Jonathan," she whispered, her voice breaking, I'm here. You freed me." Behind them, the shadow thrashed within the storm of glass. Its form twisted, stretched, shattered, claws clawing at nothing as every shard dissolved into smoke. It screamed his name once, not in hatred, but in longing, and then it broke apart, fragment by fragment, until there was nothing left but the faintest scent of iron and ash. The silence that followed was terrible in its weight. Only Clara's sobs filled the air, soft and trembling, as Jonathan held her against his chest. Her heartbeat stuttered, but it was there, it was alive. And then the parents moved. The mother collapsed to her knees, clutching at her skirts, the rosary slipping from her grasp. "God forgive us," she cried, her voice like torn paper. The father staggered forward, his face ashen, his hands trembling as though bloodless. "We were never her jailers," he said, staring at the shattered mirror with eyes emptied of hope. "We were her keepers. We locked her away because her darkness was stronger than she was. We thought," his voice cracked, "we thought we could keep the world safe." The mother clung to Clara's arm, weeping. "But she is our daughter. Light and dark, she was both. We feared the shadow would consume her, consume all. We feared," she broke off, burying her face in her hands. Clara looked up through her tears. Her eyes filled not with malice but a desperate yearning for forgiveness. "I never wanted to hurt anyone," she whispered. "I only wanted to live, to see the sky, to be more than a ghost." Jonathan's arms tightened around her. In that moment, he did not care whether her soul was fractured, whether the shadow's remnants still lingered in her blood. She was here, alive, trembling in his embrace. That was enough. The father sank against the ruined frame of the mirror. "Then God help us all," he murmured. "For now the choice is no longer ours. It is hers." The last candle guttered, casting the broken room in sepulchral shadow. Clara clutched Jonathan's hand as if she feared she might yet slip away, her tears wetting the shattered glass between them. For the first time in years, the house was filled, not with silence, but with the sound of a living girl's breath. And with that breath came morning. The old house, long a tomb of whispers and secrets, groaned as though exhaling centuries of grief. Its shutters creaked open. Dust fled from the rising sun, scattering in beams of pale gold that pierced the heavy air. Clara, fragile as porcelain, yet trembling with life, took Jonathan's hand. Her feet bare, uncertain, crossed the threshold of her prison. The door moaned as it swung wide, and then light. It bathed her face, stark against her pallor, kissing her skin with warmth she had not felt since childhood. Her lips parted. Her eyes widened. A smile, small, trembling, almost fearful of breaking, spread across her face. "I had forgotten," she whispered, her voice quivering like the wings of a bird taking its first flight. "Forgotten how the world feels." She turned to him, her fingers curling tighter around his own. "Thank you, Jonathan. At last. I am outside." Together they stepped onto the path where ivy clung to the stones, where the air smelled of damp earth and roses. Behind them, the house loomed tall, brooding, a husk of secrets that could no longer contain them. Its shattered windows glimmered like empty eyes, watching as its prisoner finally walked free. The parents stood in the doorway, silent and broken. They did not follow. The mother's hands were clasped, trembling in prayer. the father's eyes hollow, filled with both loss and a strange, weary relief. They did not call Clara back. They knew the chain had been broken, the door forever opened. Jonathan squeezed her hand, steadying her. "The world is waiting," he murmured. Clara tilted her face to the sky, her hair catching the dawn. Her smile was faint but certain now, the smile of a soul reborn. And though her eyes glimmered with sorrow's shadow, there was hope, too delicate, fragile, but alive. The narrator's voice wove through the scene, low and solemn. Like scripture written on smoke, there are girls who are bound not by chains, but by secrets. Secrets so dark, they swallowed the light of entire houses, entire hearts. Yet when such secrets shatter, the world itself must shift. For some doors are better left unopened, but some hearts must be freed. The sun rose higher, gilding her pale face in gold. The girl who never left her room had, at last, stepped into the world, and the world, in turn, would never again be the same.